Hi everybody, welcome to this video embedded PowerPoint for sections 3.2 and 3.3 in Culinary Math. So let's get right started. The objectives for us this time are to calculate an EP quantity using an AP quantity and a yield percent. So in other words, to calculate how much will we end up with, or to calculate an AP quantity using an EP quantity or a yield percent, or another question, how much should I order? So think about this a couple ways. In the professional kitchen, you might need to end up with 50 pounds of peeled diced white potatoes for service. You might know the yield percentage for potatoes is 78.1, but not know how many pounds you should order. This is a real problem we would experience, right? So the formula to calculate how much we should order, that AP quantity, is EP quantity, so 50 pounds, divided by the yield percent. And remember, you must convert that to a decimal. So 50 divided by 0.781 will give us the AP quantity, or how many pounds of potatoes should we order. Another example, in the professional kitchen, you might know a case of white potatoes weighs 45 pounds. Know the yield percent of peeled potatoes is 78.1%, but not know how much usable pounds of potatoes you will end up with. I don't know why I have usage there. Sorry, it should be usable. So that formula, or how much should I order, EP quantity, is AP quantity, 45 pounds, times your yield percent, 0.781, will give you your EP quantity, or how much will you end up with. This is a cool little triangle here for you to use, and I uploaded a form for you to download and use to learn this section. So look for that under this week's lesson. So EP divided by AP will give you yield percent. And if you follow the arrow here, this line can kind of tell you what the formulas are. EP divided by line AP will point to yield percent. Let's look at the next one. If we want to solve for EP, that's AP times Y percent, right? We multiply across here to end up with EP. And the final one is EP divided by yield percent. That'll give us this guy, or AP. So now let's look at an example here. Let's move this. If you purchase 15 pounds of pineapples, what EP weight of cubed pineapple can you expect? Well, according to the book of yields, cubing pineapple has a yield of 48.4%. That makes sense because there's a lot of waste, right? There's that whole crown, there's that thick skin, there's the core. So AP weight, 15 pounds times yield percent, 0.484, will tell us our EP weight, which will be 7.26 pounds. And that's about right? Because 48 is about half, and 7.25 is a little less than half of 15. Let's look at another example. You have a recipe that requires 700 grams of cubed honeydew. Well, that's EP, right? Because if it's already cubed, then we've done something to fabricate it, so that's edible portion. How many AP pounds of melon yielded this EP weight? So how many pounds did we have to come up with? Well, if we look at the book of yields, cubed honeydew has a yield of 57.5. So we take that formula to solve for how many AP, that's our question. So we're solving for AP, and that formula is EP divided by yield percent will give us AP. So when we look at this, the only problem is that, let's see, it says how many pounds. So we want to go ahead and get that 700 grams converted right out of the chute. So if we take the 700 grams and we divide it by our yield percent, we end up with 1,217.3913 grams. But the problem asked for pounds, so let's go ahead and convert that amount of grams to pounds by using our bridge method. And when we do that, we get our answer of 2.6838 pounds. Let's look at example 3. A recipe calls for 12 pounds of diced carrots, and you have 15 pounds on hand. Do you have enough carrots for this recipe? Well, someone that wasn't studying yields would say, duh, yeah, I do. Recipe calls for 12 pounds. I have 15. I have enough. But you know well enough that your AP quantity, that 15 pounds there, is not your edible, or how much you'll end up with after you peel and dice those carrots for this recipe. So we have to apply the yield percent to see if we have enough to make this recipe. So the book of yields says that our yield is 81.3. Let's plug in that formula. AP weight, 15 pounds, times the yield percent, which is 81.3, and to multiply, we would take and move that decimal 2 places this way. So 15 pounds times 0.813 gives us, we will have usable 12.195 pounds. So we'll have just a little bit more than we need to make this recipe, so the answer is yes. Another way to look at this, if the book of yields states that the yield for carrots is 81.3, you can take it the first way we did it, or you can take the 12 pounds, the EP weight that it's called for, divide it by the yield percent, right? So EP divided by yield percent will give us the AP weight. So 12 pounds is what we need, divided by the yield percent, 0.813, tells us that we need to order at least 14.7601 pounds to end up with 12 edible pounds. So here are some points to keep in mind as you're doing this. Either formula will answer the question. Both are just estimates. Sometimes actual yield tests done in-house need to be done, and we talked about that in PowerPoint 3.1 and why that is the most accurate way to get a yield, even more accurate than the figures you'll see in the book of yields. So I want you to take some time out to practice your worksheet. If you want to pause this and practice that worksheet, go ahead and do that now and come back to the rest of this PowerPoint when you're ready, where we will be working on section 3.3. So section 3.3, I want to really underscore how important this is, and I hope that in week 3 that I've developed a little bit of trust in you that if I say something is important, it's not just because I want you to do busy or nonsense work, it's because I've seen it trip a lot of students up. So I really want you to take this one seriously, and we're going to talk about quantities that compensate for waste, and I'll tell you what I mean as we advance this slide a little bit. So move this out of the way again. We only have one objective in section 3.3, although this section is very important and you're going to use it for the rest of this course and the rest of your career. Sometimes you have to understand when you don't need to use a yield percent when calculating EP or AP quantities. That's right. I just spent all my time telling you how important it is to calculate EP and AP quantities using a proper yield percent, and now I'm telling you that sometimes it's not necessary. Yes, and here's why. Okay, so sometimes a recipe writer will write a recipe in a way that it determines how much each ingredient needs to be purchased, right? And the way that they do that, like a recipe writer could say, for this recipe, you need 2 pounds of peeled, diced, cored apples. You need 1 cup of sugar. You need 1 teaspoon of, cinnamon, and you need 1 each vanilla bean scraped. Okay, so in that I said that the vanilla bean was written by a quantity of count or eaches, as we talked about last week in section 2.4. I already know that there's going to be waste. All I want you to do is open the vanilla bean and scrape open the seeds inside, and I know that you're going to throw away or not use the rest of that bean, so in essence you'd have waste, but I already know that. So I've already assumed that the way I write it is already the EP quantity. I don't need you to go and look up a yield percent. So let me give you some more examples of when you might see this. Let's say that we're back to that tomato soup that I said you might make from the farmer's market when we talked about constraining ingredients. If I said to you, go get a head of garlic, and then I want you to chop it and saute it as a first step in this recipe, I don't need to know the yield percent. Go buy a head of garlic. I hope to God that I can trust you, that you are going to pull out that stem from the center, that you're going to take that sticky skin off, that you're going to cut off the little end on the cloves of garlic. But if you get 1 head of garlic, although I know that there's waste on a head of garlic, I know that 1 head of garlic is what you'll need to make this recipe. No need to look up yield because I wrote it in a way that I already assumed waste. Same thing with a clove of garlic. I might say 2 each cloves. I know that you're going to fabricate those, but still go get 2 cloves. I might say a bunch of basil. To make this soup, you're going to use 1 bunch of basil. I know that you're only going to pull off the leaves and maybe cut them into a chiffonade and finish the soup with them. Still only get 1 bunch. You don't need to divide by the yield percent to know how much to order for this, because I said 1 bunch and I wrote that compensating for waste already. And you'll see that in things like eaches, eggs have yield percentages, but if I say 4 eggs, I know that you're going to throw away the skin, right? Or the peel, I'm sorry. So the only time that you would not divide by yield percent to know how much to order is if the recipe writer wrote the ingredient by a quantity of count, which is usually expressed seen here or by eaches or something like that. And you can look at this closer by zooming in on pages 91 and 92 of the textbook. So let's practice a couple of these. Let's move me out of the way here. Yield or no yield. Here's our game. So if a recipe calls for 250 grams of diced carrots, well, we're doing something to these carrots. We're dicing them, and we're measuring weight, right? So I didn't say anything about eaches. I said I need a certain weight of carrots, so we do need a yield percent, right? In order to know how much to order. How about the second one? I need 2 cups of sliced apples. Well, I said 2 cups, so you're going to fill up a volume container up to the top, the definition of volume, right? The amount of space an object takes up. So yes, you would need a yield, because in order to end up with 2 cups of prepared, you're going to start with more than 2 cups of unprepared. But if I said to you, go to the store and get a bunch of celery and mince it, I know that you're going to not use parts of that and there's going to be some waste. So no yield is needed for that recipe in order to know how much to order. How much do you order if you need 1 bunch of celery? 1 bunch. So take some time out, do that worksheet to make sure that you have this down. We will probably spend a little bit of time talking about this in this week's Zoom because it's super important and I want to make sure that you're confident in doing that. You don't have to pay attention to this last slide. This is just something that my in-class, my on-the-ground class will use. So for you, just do your worksheets, do as many practice problems as you need to do in the workbook, and I will see you in Zoom and discussion. Bye, everybody.